That
Do I
way we'll
just
have it ready to
do I
go.
just take this one down?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to take that down, get back to your desktop, and I think you have the other one saved on it.
So I do. Yeah. Could I? Yeah, you're still there. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
Thought I cut you off, but I
Oh,
didn't.
please don't. Stay away from
Yeah.
any boxes or anything that has an X.
Yeah, I definitely am not touching those. This is the sound class.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm still on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still on the screen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's there.
There it is.
Okay. Let me
All
move it one
right.
slide. Yep, it's there. Now
Yeah.
this one is and when I give this class, I'm usually standing there handing out pieces because there's a lot of different membranes for
Oh,
sound
yeah.
isolation. So there's probably 10 minutes in my class where I'm just walking around the room handing stuff out.
Mm.
So this one, without being able to hand stuff out and show it to them, might not go 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, we definitely want to try to we got to make sure that we get enough time that they can get their credit. So I
Yeah,
will keep
yeah.
you
I'll
on
be
track with that.
long-winded, trust me. I'll
I
do
was
it.
going to say, I don't think you're short for conversation.
Yeah,
So.
never have been. I apologize. I was looking at the wrong clock over my head here. I was 5 minutes off myself. I For some reason my timer didn't pop up. Usually my timer
Yeah.
on PowerPoint pops up in the left-hand corner, so I'm looking at a clock, and that's why I didn't notice
Oh,
that I
wow.
was finishing quicker. I would have slowed it down.
What the clock?
Yeah, I have two of them right over my screen here.
I have a
One,
clock in
one of
every
them
room in
one
my
of them's
house.
obviously dead because
Yeah.
it's still at 2:30.
It, when we have when the time change, I've got a clock in every room, so it takes a while to get them all back on track because they're battery operated. They're not on your smartphone or whatever that automatically changes times for you. So
Yeah, all my clocks are done to the what do you call it? The international time thing.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So even though I take the battery out and put a new battery in, you wait about half an hour and it tells you what time it is.
Nice. Very nice. Hmm. Now I look at
Well,
the digital clock on my computer. That's what I go by mostly.
yeah. Also down at the bottom, I was noticing it. The timer on there said an hour and 23 minutes, and I was like, "There's no way we were talking that long." So
No.
it must have been from the time I logged in
Oh,
and then we
yeah.
got
Could be.
started.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually, while we're talking about that, I'm going to just remind all of the attendees that about that. So I think for those of you that have been with us all day, hopefully you've stayed logged in and not been back and forth. If you have, that's also fine. We'll get a report at the end of the webinar that tells us when you were present. So, if you happen to need to leave and you're not going to be there for an hour, it's okay to log out and use that same link to log back in. We'll have a report that'll tell us what sessions you attended, and we will submit those credits to AIA for you. Um, Give us, we need our 10 days to get all those credits uploaded because this is a pretty robust program with 24 hours over a 4-day period, but rest assured we'll get them up there, and hopefully that will take care of all the credits you need before the end of the year so you can renew your license. Those of you that know that you have to get your credits by the end of the year, but that you've got till February 28th to renew your license. So those two dates are important, and sometimes people get them confused. So you don't have till February. You got to get your credits by the end of the year. And again, with that, we still have some openings. I think you've got about an hour and a half if anybody needs to register for tomorrow's webinar. And then you can still register for Friday. So we've been offering daily price options in case you can't make it all 4 days. And then, of course, Friday is the last day, and it has the advanced Florida Building Code class at the end. We have one more live webinar next week, and then we have on-demand courses. And that on-demand course library has grown quite a bit this year. So I encourage you to check it out and see what we have. There's a bunch of advanced courses out there, but there's also some courses about resilience that we added this year that are not advanced courses, but they have some really, really important information. And of course, all of that qualifies for credit that you can apply to your license renewal. So there's lots of that. And just for fun, we have opened registration for our convention, which is next year in Tampa. It's going to be at the JW Marriott at the end of July. So registration is open. The link to book your room is open. So we are active on that. The advantage to registering now is when we have the schedule available. So which we're doing now, we're getting the schedule for the convention worked out. Once it's ready, we will go back to those that registered in advance and give you guys first option to sign up for a lot of the classes that are selling out. So a lot of times our tours sell out pretty quick. We had a photography workshop this year that sold out within a couple days. We have multiple lunch sessions that get tight on space. So that's the kind of the incentive. If you know you're coming, just go ahead and get registered, and that way you have first chance to get into the courses for next year. And we hope to have all of that revealed probably by February. We'll have it so you can look at the agenda and what all the fun things that we're going to be doing at convention next year. But again, it's open, ready for you to sign up. All that's on our website. Any questions that you have about renewing your license, getting your credits, any of that stuff, certainly give us a call here at AIA Florida. Drop us a note in the Q&A box. We're here for you. All right, I'm going to stop now, but we still have, let's say, about 5 minutes, and then we will get started with our next presentation.
So Jim, when did you say the convention was next year? What date?
July 30th through August 2nd. So that's a Wednesday through Saturday. So Wednesday is the annual meeting, and then we kick off with our, education sessions Thursday morning, and then we go all day Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The trade show is Friday afternoon. The design awards is Saturday night. That's kind of our culmination of the whole event happens at the design awards that night. And for those of you who go to the convention, know that we used to have CE courses on Sunday. We no longer do that. And to be honest, I haven't heard any complaints about ending on Saturday and giving everybody their time back to themselves on Sunday. So yeah, it's Wednesday through Saturday. Somebody was asking about getting a copy of the schedule. Just a quick note that the presentation material is in the resources tab, but also a copy of the schedule. I forgot to tell you guys that, my bad. So you can look at that, and that will tell you what's happening, from the beginning to the end, when our breaks are, what sessions are being held. So yeah, check out the resources tab. That will give you material, a schedule, as well as kind of a white paper, just document about the CE credits and the requirements and how we handle all of that. So, and then you will also get an email that will have a link to the material as well. So if for whatever reason you aren't able to get it during the webinar, you'll still have an opportunity to download that when you get an email from us. All right. I don't know. What do you say? Let's go ahead and start. What do you say? 5 minutes early?
You want me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's, I think that's fine. I think everybody's probably back by now. All right, let's do it. It's all you.
All righty. Next presentation. It's the sound isolation for tile, stone, and LVT, which is luxury vinyl tile. I've been involved in the sound world for well over 40 years. And this has to be one of the most confused subjects in all of the history of building. Yet it's the simplest subject I've ever actually dealt with, but it gets misconstrued in so many ways. It's unbelievable. And it is a building code item. It's not something that we actually make up. So sound isolation, this is normally an issue that you're dealing with when you're in multifamily residential. And we're targeting specifically the areas that would be using tile, stone, luxury vinyl tile, bamboo, engineered woods, et cetera, that kind of stuff. Okay. So we're going to go over what we call, and I don't know where this came from, but I just have heard it so long. I say we call it floor to floor noise and why you should be concerned about that. And we're going to go over the types of sounds, which the actual sound rating system is. There's two items. And believe it or not, most people look at the one that doesn't even really matter and don't look at the one that does matter. So what are the difference between these two and how are they actually tested? And the IIC of those two things you just saw is the impact insulation class. We're going to go over what that is and how we actually do the measuring of the noises there. And we're also going to go over the STC part, but as you'll see, when you're dealing with flooring material, STC doesn't really get in the middle too much. Now, again, this is a Florida class, so I put the Florida code and the sections in here. But I do this class also in Texas and other places, so they are different. They're going to be probably, if you were in Texas, it'd probably be chapter 14 or 16, and the section number might be different. But in Florida, we're dealing with section 1207. So this is a building code item. And even in chapter 8, especially section 804, it refers to some of the items that need to be tested in order for a product to be really meet the standard, we'll call it. And then obviously, like we did in the other class, we're going to go back into the ANSI and Tile Council handbooks on the sound rated floor systems. Now, here's where it gets confusing. It's not confusing to me, but I've seen it forever. We're going to go over the various types of configurations, and that's where I'll lose a lot of people. The various ratings of acoustical improvements. How do you find the proper test result for your project? And I can't see the bottom when that bar is in the way, so I'll just have to flip. So this really comes into play predominantly in high-rise condominiums. Now, it's done by occupancy rating. It really is done by occupancy rating. And every once in a while, you may see a 100-story commercial building, and you might have to adhere to section 1207, but it's rare. It doesn't happen that often. This really drives you bonkers in the world of condos, multifamily residential. So before we get started, you have to understand that in multifamily residential, tile, stone, luxury vinyl tile, wood, a lot of these products are preferred flooring types. You rarely, if ever, go into a condo and see bare concrete. As a matter of fact, in the state of Florida, you couldn't do that. It wouldn't meet the building code. So there has to be something on top of the floor to reduce the sound in order to be able to meet the building code itself. So we definitely have a very unique subject. So even in a bathroom area, in the kitchen, or even in a hallway, if this is an occupancy rating of a permanent residence, a multifamily residential, then you're required to meet the minimum level sound rating for the floor itself. That's the whole floor. You're required by the building code. So we're looking at an item that really needs to be done correctly. And so let's look at the world of condos. A few people from Miami recognize this building, or I guess Fort Lauderdale on the right-hand side. I forgot the name of it, but in the movie world, If you ever see any of Vin Diesel's movies where they're driving all these fancy cars, I think it was the second one where they had all these little pocket rocket cars come flying out of the basement. Those bottom floors over there that are the parking deck, that's where those cars came flying out of. They filmed it right there. Now, this is a flooring person's absolute dream because every one of these balconies is probably going to have tile on them. The center core there, now that the building code has changed and you have to have the sound rating even in the common areas, that's going to have tile in there. And then inside the common area of your unit, you're going to have tile. So this is actually a dream come true to a flooring salesperson. Now, the leading complaint in all condominium associations, and I'm saying across the world, is sound. There's no question about it. You know, obviously the owners don't want it, and they certainly let you know they don't want it. And they don't call me; they call their condo association head, whoever is the person in charge. And they do have in condo associations, they do have condo association managers, and I actually have a class specifically for them for this subject. Wish it was attended better. Wouldn't be such a confusing subject to them, but it is specifically set up so that they know everything they need to know about taking care of the people that live in that building or buildings like that in condominiums. Now, this has always been there, always will be there. Failure to meet state and local building code requirements can lead to litigation. And don't forget that I said that. I said it at the beginning and I'll say it at the end. Because I have been called, unfortunately, to more sound issues as far as legal activity is concerned than all of the other products I've represented in my career together. And that's scary. And Florida, we are the king of condos, and maybe second only to Singapore, if that indeed they might be past us. So we are definitely what you would call the condo capital of the absolute world. Now, sound is a very, very unusual thing. I apologize, but you're listening to my South Carolina accent, so that's sound. You know, I'm speaking to you. It's being received by the speaker, and then it's being transmitted over to you, and it's going into your ears. Now, if you look at the way the sound is of different areas on this picture, each one of these pictures has either an impact sound and or an airborne sound. Now, inside this building right now that I'm sitting in, if an aircraft were to fly directly over this building, I would hear it, and I guarantee you would hear it. I guarantee you. Now, that's not what this is really all about. There are standards set of what the maximum allowable sound passage can be. That's pretty much what the sound world is all about. So any one or all of these put together could be an issue, but when you pop into a building such as multifamily residential, the rules are different. So in order to have a sound, you have to have some sort of a source that it starts from, like a firecracker, let's say, or if I were to bang my hand on this table. Usually I do that in one of my classes because I like to give a test on how the vibration actually runs from one end of the table to the other. But we can't do that, so we'll have to just imagine it. So look on the left-hand side, and you can see that this is an airborne source, which would be my voice, which would fall under the rating of sound transmission class, which is STC. And my voice is starting, and it'll be received by your ear on the right-hand side. Now, that is not going straight there to you. It is a wave, and it's a very unique wave. If you had a little thing of water sitting next to you, and you dropped the marble into it, you would see that the waters would start waves, and it would go out to the edge of the container and then stop and convert and turn back into it. So it's a wave pattern, and it can be reduced every time it hits a hard surface. Now, in many worlds, such as aircraft and heavy industrial equipment, warehouses, sound's huge. I mean, these people can go deaf, literally, relatively quickly. So they understand the world of sound, but their way of solving the problem is relatively simple. They give you a set of earmuffs. Like I said to one condominium association that had such bad sound transmission through their floors, I made a joke that they should give out earmuffs to everybody. They didn't like that, by the way. I didn't think that was very funny. I didn't mean it to be mean, but it is true. You got to stop it somehow. Now, if you look at this big, tall, red thing in the middle, it looks like a thermometer, right? And if you've ever watched any football, or especially the Seattle Seahawks, you know what this is. It is a thermometer. And what do the Seahawks do? And I think it's the 12th player. They always start screaming, and they have one of these in the stadium. And as they get louder and louder and louder, it goes higher and higher and higher. And as a matter of fact, the game last week, if you go look on the right-hand side where it says sound pressure level, the game last week hit right at where those blue arrows are. It was right at 123. Drop all the way down below 90. They drop all the way down to 70. Right between 70 and 90 is where you can actually damage your eardrums, right in the middle of those two. So the people that go into this football game, they really are nuts. I mean, they ain't gonna hear for a couple of days after that kind of racket. So you're looking at basically the sound pressure level is what the actual testing method is. Look over on the left-hand side, and you'll see it's totally different. That's the sound pressure. That would be, it's rated in a whole different thing. As you can see, it's M sub U over on the left-hand side. It's just a different type of a rating system. But for the test results that we do, and I'll show you how we do it in just a few minutes, we're on the right-hand side over here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag right now before you fall asleep and tell you to look at the number 50 on the right-hand side of the sound pressure level. That level of 50, and look over to the right. You'll see a business office, a young lady typing, a man sitting in a chair, and then there's a lady at a printing machine. The building code in all 50 states, no exception to this rule, all 50 states, the building code is a minimum STC and a minimum IIC of 50. They're both. Now, they are two different tests, but for some strange reason, and I've really not ever gotten a good answer out of this, they actually are the same number, but they are, again, two totally different tests. One's an STC and one's an IIC. So look above that at the 60 number, and then the 80 number, and the 100 number. Now let's go way up here to the upper left-hand side and look at that airplane. If an airplane flew over where you are right now, is there any way on God's green earth that you would not hear it? Of course not. You will hear it. Now, if you were on the 4th floor of a building and someone on the 5th floor above you dropped a book on the floor, should you hear it? That's the question. If you do your floor according to the rules and regulations and use the proper membrane to reduce the sound and do everything according to the rules, no, you should not hear it. So it's a very unique and touchy little subject, but 50 is the number. It's the number that everybody gets hooked on, and they really don't need to worry about the actual number. The products tested will show you what the rating will be. So why should you be concerned? Why should it bother you? Well, like I said, it's in the building code, and it's an occupancy rating. It's in section 1207 of the building code itself. It's quite lengthy, everything that's in that particular section. But when it comes to sound, and here's the problem, it doesn't have a lot of information. It really doesn't. So, sound isolation for interior environments. That is the name of section 1207. Airborne sound. That's my voice. That's me talking to you right now. As you can see, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but walls, partitions, and floor ceiling assemblies separating dwelling units and sleeping units. All right, let's stop right there. Does this rule fall in any way into a hotel, a motel, or a commercial building? No, it does not, because they're not dwelling and sleeping units. And that's where I think a lot of people get kind of lost at that point in time. This is a permanent residence. That's what it boils down to. Now, if you remember back many years ago when condos were empty and people from outside of the US were buying them all up, and now they're renting them, that still is a dwelling unit, whether they rent it or not. It still is owned by a person, so it still does fall under the minimum requirements. And in the sound transmission class, it can be the sound can be no less than 50 and no less than 45 if tested in the field. And you can go to 60, you can go to 70, you can go to 80, but you can't go to 30. So that's what that's actually what that means. And you know this test. If you've ever had your hearing done, it's a very similar device, not exactly, but it's a similar device. The ASTM E90 method has been out, God, I'm going to say 70 plus years. And in the world of airborne sound, and I actually do work with products that are in the airborne sound world, it's simple. You just look up a product, grab it, set your minimum level as long as it passes your minimum level, or it's giving you the actual sound rating you need. You specify that and it goes on the wall or the ceilings. And that's pretty much the world of the airborne sound products. And if you're in a conference room right now, then you look over your head. If you see an acoustical ceiling grid there, then that's a sound transmission reducer, airborne sound. And that's relatively simple. It's not a complicated system itself. There are some other rules and regulations involved in it. As they say, alternatively, the sound transmission class of walls, partitions, and floor to ceiling assemblies shall be established by engineering analysis based on comparison of walls, partitions, and floor to ceiling assemblies, et cetera, set forth in ASTM E90. That is brand new. That is something that I know you're not going to believe this, but this is the truth. All 50 states ratified new codes, especially in the sound world, and this comes from the International Code Council, not us. They established them, passed them roughly every 3 years. January 1 of this year, the new section, that alternatively paragraph, shows up. Florida is the only state in the United States of America that did not adhere to the current new recommendations from the ICC. They put this paragraph in there, which pretty much says you can have an engineer do this stuff, because this does get confusing as I get through and start showing you pictures of different installations and different floor to ceiling configurations. You'll see what I'm talking about. And also penetrations or openings in construction assemblies for piping, electrical devices, recessed cabinets, bathtub soffits, heating, venting, exhaust ducts shall be sealed, lined, insulated, or otherwise treated to maintain the requirements. However, I love this one. Doors and door frames and sills aren't required to have that. It doesn't apply to them. And that's you got to be kidding. You hear more noise come through the front door than you hear anything else, but I'm still not sure why that is, but it is. It gives you something to laugh about real quick. Now, that's STC. IIC is basically structure-bound noise. This is the one that I'm going to say 95% of all litigation falls under structure-borne sound. You'll see a very similar looking first paragraph. Floor to ceiling assemblies in between dwelling units and sleeping units, are no less than 50 in accordance with ASTM E492. I threw you a curveball, didn't I? It's not the other test. This is a whole new test. It was created probably 20 years ago, maybe a little more by now, 20 years ago. It was designed and built by a acoustical firm in Gainesville, Florida, probably one of the leading acoustics that you will find. And I believe the ASID and the IIDA, and I'm not sure if the AIA was involved in it or not, but they came together to create this unique little testing method because it was a zoo previous to this testing method to figure this stuff out. This just brought it into closer proximity of being a small zoo. Again, another paragraph tossed at us. This is brand new as of January 1. Or it can have an apparent impact insulation class, AIIC, of no less than 45 if tested in the field with in accordance to ASTM E1007. Previous to that, we used what was called a delta factor. I don't know if you've ever heard it or not, but we were using a delta factor. This is pretty much tossed the delta factor completely out the window, and is referring to another ASTM method. All right. So Florida definitely has its opportunities to change, and they do. So this is a whole new thing. Really, 90% or greater, slightly greater, are all done by ASTM E492. It's a laboratory test. I'll show you a bunch of them when we get to it. The laboratory test is what you use. Now, again, if you are tearing up a floor or you buy an existing building and you don't know the depth of the concrete of that building, how are you going to know what your rating is? You can't, you'd have to test every room and every floor because it's different. Concrete, its density is different about every 5-6 square feet. So the laboratory test is the one that I prefer to hang my hat on. All the manufacturers of these sound isolation products have all done their laboratory tests. They've all done those tests. So those are usually on their websites. Now, our factory has done this E1007 test because I was involved in it. It was kind of fun. So we've done a few of these. However, there aren't that many of them out there because it's so new right now. And I hope that doesn't confuse you, but there's a new sheriff in town as far as existing installations, what their actual ratings are. Now, also under interior finishes, this falls under section 804.2. And the interior floor finish or floor covering material required by that section to be a class 1 or class 2 material classified in accordance with NFPA 253 fire ratings. And of course, this is very important, incredibly important, actually, because a lot of materials inside of a condominium might not be fire rated many, many years ago. And obviously something did happen for this particular section to be created. Hold on just a second. Hold on. All right. Something fell. I had to move it. Sorry about that. So this is the classification. It's actually a fire rating is what it really is. So if you have a class 1 fire rating, then you're good to go. Now, where does class 2 come into effect? The only example I know would be like prisons. A prison. If you wanted to have a fire rating classification, you could use a class 2 rating there instead of putting an acoustical ceiling or something like that in there. You could use a class 2 rating, but you'd have to have sprinklers. So class 1, you do not have to have sprinklers. Class 2, you would almost all the time be required to use sprinklers for the fire, to get the fire down to the fire rating itself. Now this picture came out of a really old book. I'll see how old some people are. That SSBC. I wonder if you know what that means. That's the Southern Standard Building Code. The little red book. Wasn't very big, but it had some seriously sharp edges. It'd cut you in half. So I was looking around it probably 30 years ago. I started looking around into it because I started doing some sound classes and things. And I found this, I couldn't find anything. So I called one of my professors and I said, hey, where in the book can I find IIC? He said, oh, look over here in the in this section in underlayments. And I'm like, huh? So I looked over in the sections and it had one sentence. It said, if you're concerned about fire rating using ceramic tile, use carpet. I was like, what? So this was one of the pictures in there that showed the actual test method back then. I mean, how they actually determined all this stuff back then. You can see that the school bell, which is pretty darn noisy, creates kind of a wavy look, a wavy decibel for sound. You can see how it moves all the way over to the right-hand side wall. You'll also see that on that wall, sound leakage. If that little area right there where the cap is not properly acoustically caulked, then the sound will leak right through it. So that's how sound waves work. If you had a little bowl of water in front of you and you dropped a penny down on top of it, you'd see the waves. They would go all the way to the edge, like I mentioned earlier. And then when they hit the edge, they would come back, but they would start to deflect and in between each other. So that is known as basically the airborne sound. Now look down at the bottom on the floor where it says absorbed. I didn't even know this was in there for many years until I looked it back up again. Our job for our applications, which would be multifamily residential, is to absorb that airborne noise or impact noise, either one. Now the word incident means impact. So it showed both of them, the airborne waves and then the incident. And our job would be to absorb it so that it doesn't transmit through the slab into the residents below. So as you could see inside of our condo, I got this from an insurance guy. He's pretty funny, so I thought it was cool. And you can see all kinds of craziness goes on in a condominium or an apartment complex for that matter. But remember, apartments aren't required to meet these minimum requirements because they're not permanent residences. But see over to the right-hand side, the trash chute going down. My favorite is over on the left-hand side at the bottom where the washer and dryer are shaking. We actually had that happen one time along in Vero Beach. We could not find the sound where it was coming from until someone walked all the way through the building, all the way to the end of the building to where the actual laundry was. And then we realized that nobody put a sound membrane underneath that laundry to stop it. So sound can go all kinds of crazy ways. It doesn't have to go down. It can go straight up. You'll notice the fiddler on the left-hand side, just the simple touching of the floor with a violin. That frequency could literally go through that slab, come over and enter into the neighbor to the right. So impact sound is extremely weird. It can move upward. And your job is to basically stop it so that it doesn't go through the wall itself. So direct transmission for sound transmission class and flanking are your two biggest items. The direct transmission obviously is my voice. Flanking is how it goes into the floor itself, goes around, comes up through the wall, and then possibly penetrates into the neighbor and or goes through the floor and penetrates up through the floor itself. So that's basically what sound transmission through a building would do. Now, impact sound is a horse of a different color. This guy here doing a little tap dance, that's basically what the impact sound is. He already told you what the STC is. So you really have to meet, both of those have a rating of 50, IIC minimum of 50, and STC minimum of 50. That's what the target is, and that's how you have to design it.
Hey, Jim.
Yes, ma'am.
There is a question here that's kind of long, so I can read it.
Go ahead.
But let's say, are you saying that the standard of 50 is set for permanent dwellings and that noise louder, 1,000 for example, is okay? Or is the scale standard inverted where 20 is higher than 50? Or if someone designs a building to be 20, is it not allowed for other reasons? And if so, what is the reason it cannot be 20?
Okay, this is for hard surface material, remember. Okay, this is only when you're putting a hard surface material down on the floor itself. Carpet, is a heck of a sound reducer all by itself. You wouldn't even worry about it. So no, the Florida Building Code and all 50 states, the minimum IIC rating is that it can achieve is 50. All right, above that is bad. That's You're going to try to keep the sound rating from 50 down. We'll just put it that way. And above it, that's where you're going to run into problems. So no matter whether it's airborne or not, impact 50 is the number. You want to keep it below 50.
Okay, thank you. Oh, wait, let's see. So
Now,
yeah, 50 is
that
the
is not
max.
easy to do.
All right.
All right, so we'll get into more. I'll show you some pictures in a minute that'll explain it just a little bit better, okay?
All right.
Now, impact insulation class, again, just showing you the right-hand side. You're looking at a structure-borne sound attenuation, and that's the footfall noise is theoretically what we call it. We call it footfall noise. Yes, you could drop a glass. Yes, you could drop a baseball. Yes, but we call it footfall noise because you're definitely walking on the floor a lot more than you are dropping things on the floor. At least I hope you are. And it is assembly specific. All right, this is where we lose 95% of not architects and designers, I'm not saying y'all, but condo association managers, the people who are literally supposed to execute this building code. This is where we lose them right here. When I say structure borne specific, meaning their structure, period. If they are 6-inch bare concrete, then they can't use a test that is 8-inch concrete with an acoustical drop ceiling. And that's what they do because they want to get the higher ratings up in the 70 range, but you can't do it. Remember, it is assembly specific. So whatever you got is what you get. Various codes throughout the whole country, but they all are really close together. I mean, there's nothing unique and different. The Florida Building Code, again, is IIC of 50, and the 45 is a field test. Now, it's difficult to do a field test because in order to do that, you got to get rid of the neighbor beneath you because the machine is going to be on top of the floor that you're standing on. That's the problem. And then you have to get rid of the people below just to do the test. And then if you had to do any repair or fix it, let's say, they'd have to stay out of the unit below also. So it's kind of a catch-22. You got to stay on top of it. But again, we're in Florida, so we're looking at 50 and 45. And in 40 plus years, 45 years, I've never been drug into a courtroom or had a lawyer call me about a field test ever. They always are arguing over the laboratory test. Again, let's go back to sound transmission class, all right? It's a single number rating derived from a laboratory measurement of sound transmission loss. Okay, it's described. What they do is the floor to ceiling assembly will have various ranges of tests between 100 to 4,000 hertz frequency ranges. They will do as many as, I'm going to say 13 physical tests on the same thing, the same product. They'll throw out the high, throw out the low, and they'll take the average of the remaining tests, and that will be the actual STC number. That's in theory, not exact. That's in theory how it works. So remember that the requirement is 50. Now, in the world of sound transmission, like I said, the acoustical panels, the boards that are made just for this subject do the job. I mean, they don't have the impact vibration. They have the airborne vibration. So they're able to, if you look at the left-hand side, just those few acoustical panels put on the ceiling there would be more than enough to suck in all the sound that particular cooking area would make. Probably not the smell, but certainly the sound. Now, and when you're doing the testing, you do have to have a recording device and then a computer, et cetera, et cetera. But sound is just, it's a weird thing. It's very unique. Airborne sound is extremely unique. I say impact sound is actually simple. It was as simple as that picture I just showed you. We do call it the footfall noise. And that's the theory that we have. There is an ASTM standard, E492, that all manufacturers have to adhere to this test. It's done specific and exact. There's a little testing machine, that little device. It was created by the people I mentioned in Gainesville and several of the associations. I'm pretty sure AIA and ASID and them were involved in it. I don't remember back that far, but so it's a little pistons. You can see they'll be moving and it'll just be tapping the floor. They'll start right there and they'll use the machine and let the computer absorb it for X number of minutes, and then they'll move it a whole bunch of different times. Now notice there's no walls in here. It's flat. There's nothing adhering to the edges. So this tapping machine is going to be catching the sound rating from beneath it. As you can see down at the bottom picture, that would be underneath it. Okay. Now, look at the top picture there. You can see the little tapping machine in the middle of the floor on this particular installation. Also notice the recording device is up here on the top. You can see the recording arm sitting there. But it literally, on the bottom picture, you can see actually what we're talking about. That is a piece of concrete with the material installed directly on top of it. We test that. Again, X number of frequencies. Again, it computer throws out the high and the low and then does the average and comes up with the rating. All right. So if you test bare concrete itself before you do anything else, you'll come up with an IIC number. We'll talk about this in just a few more minutes. All right. Then add the sound membrane and the flooring surface, then test it again. The computer itself will start going in and basically calculating a whole bunch of crazy things, and it will come up with a delta factor. That factor would be what the substrate itself contributes to the final number. And in this instance, I'm just saying it's called the delta factor. It really can be 6-inch concrete, 8-inch concrete. It doesn't matter. We can do it with each one. And that's a good thing to have. We know what the actual membrane contributes. We know what the concrete contributes. And unfortunately, I don't want to hear this, but the thin set, the grout, and some of the other some other items in a flooring, they don't really contribute anything, and sometimes they actually create a negative. That's why they do it X number of times and come up with an average test. Anybody totally confused yet? Now you're going to get confused. Again, now the ANSI standard and Tile Council handbook really can help you, but not a lot in this. They just give you information on setting materials and stuff of that nature, and even dimensional stone. Our industry does have tests that are run that the laboratory doesn't do. We want to know how fungus and microorganisms are with the setting material. So there's a standard for running some other tests for certain strengths. And the floor itself has to meet a minimum of a residential rating wherever you do this. And whatever the sound transmission is, the product has to have at least a delta of 10, meaning it will add 10 to the final rating. Otherwise, you can't even use it. Now, if I had a delta of 24 on my product, I wouldn't worry about it. But if I had a delta of 8, then I would automatically know that I wouldn't be able to use that product. Hold on here. Oops, my finger's clicking. This is kind of a small little chart that'll help you through this. Let's look at the top two, 6 and 8-inch concrete. No ceiling assembly, no sound rated ceiling. That's what the X is for. Look over to the right-hand side. In a laboratory IIC test, that 6-inch concrete could yield between 26 and 30. So let's just average that and say it's 28, just for the heck of talking. On a field test, it's going to be a little lower. So that's why sometimes a field test that's why the field IIC is 45 and not 50. So you'll see it's 24 to 32, which is a really broad range. That would be only if you ran an actual field test. Now look over at the left-hand side again to 8-inch concrete, then move over to the second row and look at the laboratory IIC. 28 to 32 average is based on what they say. And the actual test rating you need to get is 50. So let's say your concrete gave you 30, right in the middle. The rest of the assembly, the setting material, the membrane, the grout, everything has to give you the difference to meet the minimum requirement. It's just like a little mathematical problem. I'll drop one more down to the 6-inch and you'll see it has a acoustical ceiling, suspended ceiling. In a laboratory test, the 6-inch with an acoustical ceiling grid got a much higher rating. Go to 8-inch, it got a little bit higher rating. That's with the acoustical ceiling though. And as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, I'm just gonna say 90% of all the floors in multifamily residential that I see, I don't see them all, are bare concrete. There's not that many acoustical ceilings here. Why? Well, our minimum floor to ceiling height is right at 8 feet. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's right at 8 feet. New York, probably 9 feet. North of Atlanta, probably equal to that, 9 feet. So if you have extra space, you can put acoustical ceiling material in there to get these higher numbers. Now we sell our products throughout the whole country. So one of my membranes could be sold in Miami and in New York. So I'm going to have an acoustical ceiling test for the people in New York. I'm going to have the 6-inch bare concrete test for the people in Miami. Unfortunately, that confuses people, unfortunately. And a lot of people are using the acoustical ceiling grid test in Florida, and that's what they set their standard on. And that's not how it works. Sad, but that's not how it works. Now, you can increase the rating of the floor, but not dramatically like an acoustical ceiling grid would. Two ways, and this is standard, period. You should do this anyway. Isolate any floor, any ceramic tile, stone floor, you need to isolate the perimeter or anywhere it abuts a hard surface. You cannot use setting material all the way to the wall and the grout all the way to the wall. If you do, your tiles are going to pop up anyway. So you would use a perimeter isolation device, an acoustical sealant. That would isolate the floor and stop any flanking noise. Now, flanking noise usually occurs like in the bathrooms with the piping and something that sticks through the floor itself. If you do that, that's more than enough to, be able to have a good rating for your floor itself. However, you're never going to get ratings in the 60s and 70s unless you have the space from the floor to ceiling height to put an acoustical ceiling grid in there. And at 8 feet being the minimum floor to ceiling height, when you have a developer designing a condominium, do you think they're going to give you 9 feet for the heck of it? No, it's probably going to be 8. And if Shaquille O'Neal were to walk in with a brand new pair of shoes into an 8-foot ceiling grid and sneezed, he'd probably bonk his head. He really would. So you don't have a lot of additional space underneath to increase any of the floor ratings that we see in Florida. Well, excuse me, change that. Not any, the bulk of the floor ratings that we have here in Florida. So here's a better picture of what I was talking about. There's your wall. Notice abutting that wall is a little thing with straight lines, and then right underneath above the tile, that is the caulking area. That'd be where you would use an acoustical caulk. Now, if this wasn't a multifamily application, I'd still want to do that because that is your expansion and contraction joint that stops floors from popping up off, the concrete itself. And then it's your choice as to how you fill the balance of that cavity, let's say. That looks like they probably put a piece of ethafoam in there, cut it off, and then use the acoustical caulk over the top of that. If you do that and someone drops a glass in the middle of a room, that sound vibration will come flying from the right-hand side into this picture, come all the way over to the two little baby blue things, and both of those will stop that from hitting that wall and going through the floor to the neighbor beneath you. It will actually do that. So that's what you want to design the floor to look like. And this would be what flanking is. Now, this acoustical sealant and caulk, we'll call it, is pretty much the same thing that the plumbers would use. It just has to be fire rated in multifamily residential. That's all. So flanking can cause the system to be really bad. But if you use the proper sealants and caulking around wherever your protrusions are, then you should be fine. Now, again, it's based on an occupancy rating. And even though you would say that sometimes in residential world, uh, you might get caught where you have two condos sitting side by side, and there's a concrete block wall in between the two. Well, again, remember, it's done by occupancy rating, so it's very rare do you actually see that. Now, could you use a sound membrane in a two-story house? I did, just like the one on the right. That was my office, and I didn't my kids playing. Excuse me, that was my kids' playing room. My office was directly beneath it, and I didn't want to hear them all day, so I used a sound membrane in my home. Sure did. But again, it is mostly high-rise condominiums. That's where we're dealing with this rule. Now, it is building assembly specific. Never forget those words. Building assembly specific. That's what we're looking at. Now, this comes right out of the concrete guide, and it should be very similar to that chart I just showed you a minute ago. You're looking here at pictures of 4, 6, and 8-inch concrete, and according to the concrete guide itself, it can contribute an IIC of 24. Now, I hope everybody's had some coffee. Let's do some quick mathematics. All right, the rating we need to reach is 50. That's the minimum rating we need to get. So what do we need? 50 minus 24 is 26. So that's what you'd have to meet the minimum requirement in Florida. So you'd have to have components on that substrate to add to that. What are you going to have? A membrane, setting material, grout, and caulk. And that's probably it. There's probably nothing else you could put on it. Now, if this was a wood floor, I'll show you those in a minute. This is a concrete floor. Now, the sad part about it is that the surfacing material, the setting material, and the grout don't really add much of anything to the rating itself. Where you're going to get to 50 is with the membranes. They are going to give you, they're designed specifically to absorb sound and vibrations. So they're going to get you into that rating. That's how it works. So 6-inch concrete here would be 28. 8-inch down at the bottom will give you 32. Now, 50 minus 32 is 18. On 8-inch concrete floors, there's a lot of people who make the membranes that have a delta of 18. However, let's go back to 6-inch concrete. 28. So now you're looking at what? 32 to get to the 50? I mean, 22 to get to the 50? There aren't very many products out there that have a delta of 22. So it is a tough thing to do in the world of multifamily residential, but we do have products that will do it. 4-inch concrete is very difficult to do. And it depends, as to how old the building is, as to how much space you have as far as from the floor to the ceiling is. But you might be able to put one ceiling tile on the bottom of a 4-inch piece of concrete. You might, without exceeding the minimum requirements for the floor to ceiling height. You might. But now, let's say you don't live in Florida. Let's say you move up north. And you could get some serious ratings with all the components. Look at the second one on there. You have concrete slab, and then you have a drop ceiling grid with a spring hanger. I didn't even know what it was until I did the homework on this. Those are easy to reach the minimum level of 50 and even higher. Now, let's say you had a thicker acoustical membrane down here at the bottom and just set tile over top of it. Now, there's a minor problem with that. If the acoustical membrane is too thick and too spongy, your floor tiles your setting material is going to fail. So there's a limit as to how much you can put there, but some of the thicker underlayments and acoustical underlayments, especially in the wood world, can easily achieve the IIC of 53. And again, we're just looking at some assemblies. Notice the different assemblies here. The one that gets you the 56, it has a spring hanger, bad insulation, and gypsum board ceiling. So that's all three. And the underlayment, of course, at the top. That'll give you a 56. Now notice nowhere in here do you see any of these numbers up in the 70 range yet. So you're looking at, quite a task as far as reaching high ratings. Carpet is an amazingly good product. However, why is it not used that much in multifamily residential anymore? Because it's very difficult for them to meet the fire rating. And when they do meet the fire rating, it's pretty darned expensive. It's not a cheap product itself. So you don't really see, I'm not saying it's not used, you don't really see it quite as much as tile and LVTs and engineered wood and wood laminates. Those are the products that are really the mainstay of this industry. And even look down here at the next one below that. There's a carpet pad on it with insulation under it, getting a 73. So again, if you've got some space, you can do all kinds of crazy things. But if you don't have space, you can't do it. Now the last one's a beauty, 76. Now we did get this in one project in Miami. It was a bowling alley at the Miami University. The architect was absolutely just couldn't say he was going to get 76 or die. And it was in I think it's a 3-story building. The bottom floor was a very famous pocketbook. I can't remember even the name what the name of the factory was, but they make very expensive pocketbooks. We'll put it that way. And the ceiling height in this bottom floor was at least 14 feet. So we didn't have any issues with any spacing whatsoever. So the architect actually designed over here on the left-hand side, he designed it to look just like that. And we used an acoustical underlayment and he got a 76 on it. And the reason they did that is the floor above it, well, the floor above the pocketbook company was on top of that floor was going to be quarry tile. And then the rest of the floor, the second floor, was a bowling alley. You had to see how they built that thing. It was unbelievable. It's called Splitsville or something like that. I don't know if it's still there, but we did, where we put the tile, we actually did achieve a 76, but we had actually a tremendous amount of space in order to do that with multiple different components.
Hey, Jim, I got another
Yes.
question for you. This one came in a few minutes ago,
Okay.
but it said, so would the sound flanking detail be incorporated only at the unit separation partitions or also at each side of the unit interior partitions?
Well, it would be, basically if you live in one unit, you're going to use that in your unit. You're not going to go through the wall to the neighbor behind to your left. Same as if you would have a neighbor above you or below you. You can't control what they do and don't do. So that's a great question. Absolute great question. But certainly if you do it, you're going to stop any penetration through your unit, your floor, we'll call it. Does that make sense? Did that answer the question?
Well, I hope so.
I've actually had that only asked a couple of times, but that's actually a great question, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Now, we don't have a lot of wood construction in Florida, but we do go throughout the country. And, going up north, here's some other IIC ratings for wood construction. As you can see, wood is tough because you got airspace everywhere. You got gaps everywhere. So wood is not the simplest thing in the world to do. But you can actually achieve some very good ratings. Notice that you have to keep adding components as you go through to get your higher ratings, but you can't get really high beyond the 55 in wood. It's just the nature of the substrate itself. But you can achieve them. Now remember, every state in the United States has a minimum IC of 50 and STC of 50. So we're easily able to achieve that. You just can't go a heck of a lot beyond that. So typical in Florida, you're looking at, don't see a lot of new 4-inch concrete. That's, to me, mostly in multifamily residential. I see this in the older buildings. So you're going to have 4-inch concrete going to yield only about a 24 IIC. 6-inch concrete we see a ton of, and of course 8-inch we see a ton of, but you're going to get about 28 out of 6-inch, and you're going to get, again, repeating what I said earlier, a 32 out of your 8-inch concrete. I rarely see 10 anywhere, and we don't run a test on 10. But if it meets the minimum requirement on 8, it's going to meet it on 10. So there's no really reason to have another test. Now, just for kicks, I want you to remember my sandwich, okay? This is how it works. The bottom piece of bread is the substrate. The top piece of bread is your flooring material. The lettuce, tomato, and you probably got some mayonnaise in there. Okay. That's your setting materials and your grout. The beef, that's the membrane. That's how you reach the IIC minimum ratings with concrete and wood. You've got to have a strong membrane to be able to achieve that. So all of our membranes also, by the way, must meet the crack isolation requirement, because it would be silly if it didn't. So all of the factories that make sound membranes also make them to achieve the crack isolation code. It's all done at the same time. Well, we've already done the test separately, but it's not done during the sound test, but we've done the test on crack isolation separately. And remember, we're trying to eliminate the tap, tap, tap craziness sounds. That's our job. We're going to try to get to an IIC of 50. Now, I'm assuming one day you may have to make a call to figure out exactly what I've been telling you. So if you call me, the first question I'm going to ask you is, what is your building floor to ceiling configuration? That in itself normally confuses a condo association person. They don't know what that means. I don't just say, what is your concrete thickness? Because you could have something else there besides concrete. You could have some sort of a product underneath it, but we don't really see it that often. So what is your floor to ceiling configuration? That's where we start. All right. Next, we need to make sure that the perimeter, everywhere a hard surface is touching another vertical surface, you must isolate that. You have to stop any flanking noise whatsoever that occurs. And I mean, I recommend you do shoot for a higher than the minimum IIC rating, maybe from 51 to 52 to 53, let's say, but you're not going to go a heck of a lot farther. And if you have renovations, you either need to get an engineer to come in and do the test itself, or you could sit down and review each product if you have the delta factor for each product, which is what we talked about in an earlier slide, the delta factor of each one of the products. It's just a little mathematical equation. You just add to it. All right, that's the end of our sound isolation class. Now, again, if you're outside of Florida, you may have instances where you could achieve higher ratings because of your floor to ceiling configurations. But I'm just showing you what the bulk of the configurations that I deal with on a daily basis are, and that's either 6 or 8 inch paraconcrete.
Well, I think that you finished on almost exactly on time because we started 5 minutes early and it's about to be 4:25.
Now I looked at the correct clock this time.
It's always a good thing. It's always a
Yeah,
good thing.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've got a couple people just saying thanks and for a good presentation. We appreciate everybody's time today. Again, I can't say it enough. If you have any other questions, you could reach out to Jim directly. The same as with AIA staff. Oh, wanted to say, are your membranes loose laid or adhesive applied?
Excellent question. They are glued down. Just they are basically they are peel and stick products. You prime the floor with a water-based primer, and you peel a piece of paper off the membrane and you press it down, and then the top surface has a scrim on it which you set your tile or stone on. Any engineered wood product would be glued down, and LVTs would be glued or loose laid. So that's how they all work.
Cool. Okay.